Welcome to the Sustainable Landscaping webinar on watering efficiently using drip lines. My name is Jan, and I'll be your host for the evening. Before we get started, I'd like everyone to know that during the webinar, everyone will be muted. We encourage you to ask questions, and there will be time to answer them at the end of the webinar. To ask questions, please type them in the Q&A box and not the chat box. Tonight's webinar will include a short review of water-wise gardening and the advantages of drip irrigation. The main focus will be on how to convert an existing system with sprinkler heads to drip lines, dealing with an existing filter and pressure system, laying out lines, and adding appropriate emitters. Our speaker, Chuckie Aanestad, became a master gardener in 2016 and has earned her sustainable landscaping, adaptive gardening, and her plant diagnostics badges. She moved to Oregon in 2014 from Wyoming, where she retired from teaching professionally after 32 years in the classroom. She is an avid gardener with a special love of perennials and mixed borders. She spent over 20 years working summers and weekends at a garden center in Riverton, Wyoming. It is here that she learned how to add and use drip lines. She has converted several areas of the gardens of her new home on the McKenzie River to drip. So now I'll hand it off to Chuckie. Thanks, Chuckie.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope this webinar will provide you with some information that's useful if you're starting this sort of a project, and will provide those of you that have been using drip for a while and are already familiar with it some food for thought and hopefully some helpful tips. So here we go. The focus of the talk this evening will be on converting an existing sprinkler system to drip. But I would like to quickly review the 7 principles of water-wise gardening and the advantages of using drip before we start. Although this webinar is focusing on a how-to, actually, you will see as we move through each of the steps that these 7 principles will all come into play. Spending some time planning on paper can save you a lot of effort and money, as well as time. Knowing the type of soil that you have in various areas of garden will help you on deciding how much water is needed and how often. Each year in my garden, the lawn gets smaller and the flower beds get larger. But personally, I don't want to eliminate all my lawn. I like how it sets off the rest of the beds, and it gives my eye a place to rest. I do mulch all of my beds, whether they are on drip or a traditional overhead sprinkler system. And my husband is constantly tweaking the system so that we don't have runoff, are watering early in the morning and not watering when unnecessary. We measure the water output every week, and even though the system is automatic, it is reset as needed. My drip lines are on a completely different system. I only run them when my plants tell me they need it. I have a water meter that I use a lot. I put the water meter in the ground, but I also keep note of what my plants look like, and I don't turn on the sprinkler system until they appear to need water for the most part. Drip lines are not maintenance free. They don't work if they become clogged or there's not adequate pressure and they crack when stepped on and do not respond well at all to being chopped up by shovels, which I do a lot. So here's a few of the advantages of using drip. It helps you to water efficiently. There's practically no loss of water to runoff, evaporation, or deep percolation. And for those of you that are wondering what deep percolation is, that's when the water goes down through your sandy or silty soil so quickly that it settles below the effective root zone of your plants. It also reduces contact with crop leaves and stems and fruit, which makes conditions less favorable for disease development, and scheduling can be managed for precise needs. And I'll show you how you do that as we get into it farther. So, planning and design is the first principle of water-wise gardening. And you do take the time to plan. I do a lot of planning. And although I do plan the heck out of things, it's just a guide and it changes once I'm on the site working. I started with an aerial view. This aerial view here came with our property when we bought it. And what I did was I took graph paper and I did a scale to scale plan on graph paper. And then I divided the yard into areas. There's one here, one over here, one here. And there's a total of 8 different areas. The area that I'm going to talk about tonight is this area right here, this small little rectangle. That is the area that I am going to be adding drip to in this presentation. And this is where my raised vegetable beds and my pollinator border are. So here's that little square, that rectangle that I had outlined, circled in red, I guess. And I've added the things that were already there, which were a grape arbor, a pump house, existing sprinkler heads. Here's one in red. This is in red. Here's one in red. This one's in red, and this one's in red. So I had 5 overhead sprinkler heads when I started. And then I added these raised beds, and I added this raised bed over here. I eliminated a fence, and then I put it all in, converted it all to drip. Now, and then this is actually a 5-foot deep pollinator border all along here. Some things to consider when you're trying to lay out the blue lines, which are the main lines of the drip, are the topography of your space. This is totally flat, which is the easiest place to add drip line. And when I have a totally flat bed, I run the main line through the center of it and work from the center out. But it depends if you're on a berm, or if you're on a steep slope, then it's a little bit different. And we'll get to that in a couple of slides. So here we go. This is where I started. This is in 2014. This end of that strip was an in-ground vegetable garden, had a pump house and a white fence. This is the year we purchased the property. And on the other end of that rectangle was a strip of lawn, a nice grape arbor with wonderful grapes, and a lone snowball bush. And then down here at the very end, they had put in a rock garden with plants that needed full sun, and this is a full shade bed. So I redid that. Then this is what I have now. The grape arbor is still there. The grapes, this is earlier in the year. But here are my raised beds and the pollinator bed that I added. Okay, I had the whole area was converted. So here's the plan again. This particular area is 30 feet by 70 feet. And the size and the length of a drip line depends on your available water pressure. If you're converting an existing system, you need to convert the entire zone. And I learned the hard way that if you only convert like a couple of these to drip and leave the rest of them on overhead, they steal the pressure and the drip lines just don't work as efficiently. So they rob them of the pressure. So since there were 5 existing sprinkler heads, once again, this one, there's one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here, I put in 5 different main lines. Okay, if they're, and when now this is when you're considering where am I going to put my my main lines. It depends on whether you're flat, you're bermed, or you're on a steep slope. Like I said before, this is a flat area, so mine are running through the centers of my beds. There's one that starts here, goes and ends here. This is a pathway, that's why there's no drip line there. These are pathways. This is another drip line. It goes over to here and ends, then circles around and ends here. This one goes just a short distance here, ends, goes all the way up and ends over here. This one is buried under a walkway, but then this area out here is planted with some things that aren't in beds. Goes along here because there's posts on the grape arbor where I've planted clematis and it dripped and it waters those. And then this one here goes along the front of the asparagus bed and waters the shade garden. I do not have any drip line in my raised beds itself. I could have easily done that. I prefer to hand water my beds. They're small. I like to check on them every single day. Now, if you were going to add your main lines to a berm, you would want to run them along the highest part of the berm. The tubing's flexible to a certain point, so it can make gentle curves if you want them. Sharp curves tend to kink the line, so then an elbow, like you'll see right here, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, are needed to turn this way. It wouldn't work well to just bend the mainline tubing. It would kink and cut off the water flow.
Chuckie,
Yes?
your pointer is,
It's not showing?
no,
You can't, it's not showing up on my screen?
on our,
Does it show up now around the outside? My mouse pointer?
not see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, well, I don't know what to do. Can you see? I don't know how to fix that.
Can you go over to the lower left-hand corner? Where you're,
Okay, my laser pointer maybe?
yes, there,
Does that work?
yes,
Can you see it now?
yes.
Okay, I'll quickly go through that again. There's an overhead sprinkler head here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. That's the existing sprinkler heads that I'm going to convert. And then these blue lines like this are the main lines that I've added. So I won't go over them again. But there's 5 lines, separate lines, because I have 5 sprinkler heads. And that way the pressure stays better. I was taught to limit the length of 1/4-inch tubing to 2 feet. Now, when I moved here, there were miles and miles of tangled 1/4-inch tubing everywhere. It wasn't connected to anything, so I'm not sure if it worked or not. But I prefer to stick by that rule. So that's why I run my main line through the centers of my beds and then work off of both sides. Now, on this next slide, you'll see if you are on a steep slope, you're going to want to let gravity work for you. So this is like the top of a slope here, and you're going down the bank. You would set up a pattern like this for each sprinkler head, but you're going to want it to look like switchbacks on a trail. So you're going, it'll make gentle curves like this around. You can make as many as you want and go all the way across your whole slope and back. But then when you add your emitters, you only want them on the downhill side. So each one of these little bumps here is like an emitter. Some emitters are just right on the main line. Some emitters have a 1/4-inch tubing to go down to whatever you want. And what you need to realize on a steep slope is the water's going to keep going down. So I would typically put smaller emitters on a steep slope than I would on flat ground so that it seeps in more slowly. But this is just kind of a schematic of how you would set up a really steep slope to get efficient use. Okay. The options are almost limitless for what you can use. There's all kinds of sprayers and different kinds of emitters and things you can add to make little octopus patterns. I keep it pretty simple. I use three things. I use 1/2 inch mainline tubing, I use 1/4 inch tubing for emitters, and then I use 3 sizes of emitters: 1/2 gallon emitters, 1 gallon emitters, and 2 gallon emitters. And emitters come in different colors by sizes, and I'll talk about how to do that in a later slide here. When I came from Wyoming, I had a lot of drip line equipment, and I just brought it with me. But since I've been here, I was able to purchase some at Jerry's, some at Winco, and some online. You can go online and there's kits. The only thing I would caution you on getting a kit to start with is you're probably going to get things you don't want and not enough of the things you do want. So I prefer to plan out my system and then just order each of the parts that I need separately so I get exactly what I need. Now, if you are adding a drip line from a bib on your house instead of to an inline sprinkler head like I'm going to show you tonight, you would want to get a timer, maybe a pressure regulator, depending on the pressure tank of your house and how it affects your bibs. And then in Wyoming, I didn't have a sprinkler system. I had a bib on each side of the house with one of these hose splitter manifolds and a separate drip on each one with a pressure and a timer. I could set it and leave it, or I could just turn it off completely, or I could turn it on and then one at a time. I never ran more than 1 drip at a time because there I had very limited water. I could run my well dry, and plus it was windy, and so I could only run 1 at a time at night. But I had 12 lines, and every night somebody was running. By the time I got around the house, everything was watered. If you are interested in setting up a whole system, there's more information on how to do this in an OSU publication that I will provide at the end of this. So here we go. We're going to change out the sprinkler heads to hose in for attaching a drip line. And everybody's system is going to be in the ground at a different depth, it seems. Some of ours were only this deep, 3 or 4 inches deep. Some of them were 6 to 8 inches deep. And my husband just had to dig down until he got to where the sprinkler head was attached. And then you have to put an extender that comes up. Now, you could extend it even with the ground so it doesn't stick up like this. I prefer to have it sticking up like this, so if I need to get to it and fix it, it's easy to find and I don't have to dig it out, but that's a personal preference more than anything. Then once you have it to the height you want it, you have to go from diameters. This diameter never matches the end of your hose. Hasn't happened to us yet. So sometimes you have 3 or 4 adapters, sometimes you have 1, and you just have to know what this diameter is and what your hose end diameter is, and you have to work your way through the different sizes till you end up with what you need. Okay, now the disadvantage to having it stick up is this is a death trap and you trip over it. So this is my solution, yard art. And so I put something fun in front of them, at least until a plant grows up and hides it or something, but I like to kind of mark them so people aren't tripping them. Some of them are close to where my paths are. Now, after you've got the your sprinkler head up to where you want it, and you need to add this hose end, and be sure you get the one with the filter. If you get anything in your main line, it will clog up your drip line and it quits working. And I haven't figured out a way to fix that other than replace them all, and that's not fun. So be sure when you get your hose in, it has this little filter screen in it. Okay, so now here we are. How long your main line is depends on your available water pressure. And like I said before, do convert whole zones. Don't convert some of them to drip line and leave some of them for overhead. It just doesn't seem to work well. They don't play well together. I had 5 sprinkler heads, so I have 5 existing main lines. The most efficient ones are a loop, but a loop didn't work well for me here. But each one of these is fairly short with a hose end on the ending, and with the main line being flat and centered, it works really well. So here's what it looks like when you make a junction. You have pieces that look like this if you have to make a T, and this is how you end a drip line. It's just a piece that looks like this. You run the half-inch tubing through this side, bend it, run it back through that side, then stake it down, and that's how you put an end on the end of a drip line to make it stop. So then you're going to add emitters and 1/4-inch tubing as needed. You will need some sort of a punch. I haven't seen a punch like this available for a long time. I've had this punch for 30 years. But it fits around the tubing, and then you just squeeze it and it punches it. Most of them now you have to push, and but as long as whatever you can find works fine. But if you can find one like this, they work really well, maybe garage sales. You also need tubing stakes. This long one is for looping over the half-inch main line. This is actually for landscape fabric. If you can't find 1/4-inch tubing stakes like this, these work well. There's a little play on your tubing, but it'll hold it in place when popping up. These work best if you can find them. Then 1/4-inch tubing, which comes in rolls of different lengths, 50 foot, 100 foot. I just get a great big roll and work off of it. And then emitters. And what I have here is, I don't have an example here of a 1/2 gallon. They're usually green. I have 2 gallons are usually red, 1 gallons are usually blue. And it doesn't matter. This is one company. This is a different company. They look a little different. They emit the same amount of water. One thing about punching holes in your main line, if you goof and break it off, or something happens, or you try to pull one of these out and then put a new one in, it hardly ever works well. When you put it in initially, you should hear this little pop, and then you know it's seated and it's not going to leak. If you make a mistake, you need what are called oops plugs. And you're best off just to plug that hole and as close to it as possible. That works for you. Make another one. And we all make mistakes, so be sure you get some oops plugs. Now, when you're adding the drip line to a mixed perennial bed, there's several things that I do. I put tubing to the base of large perennials. I put it to the center of a ground cover, or use a loop of emitter tubing. Now, I didn't show you a picture of emitter tubing, but 1/4-inch tubing comes like I buy it, which is solid, but it also comes with holes, like every 12 inches or every 6 inches or every 24 inches. You can order it and get it in all sorts of increments. And the best way to use that is, let's say this emitter here, you would start it here and let's say this whole area in here was a ground cover that's growing and it doesn't have one base plant, you would put one end here, put another emitter over here, and end your loop back to the main line. And it would just drip, 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 drip all along the 1/4-inch tubing, and you wouldn't have to put it up to the base of something, okay? I put it to the outside edge of root zones of large bushes or trees with several emitters and no tubing to xeriscape plants. So here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is a bush and I've cleared it off this spring and I'm getting ready to do some maintenance, which we'll talk about later. But this particular plant needs more water. So I have 2-gallon emitters. I have 3 of them, one here, and one here. Now, they've come loose from their little stakes. So what I need is a triangle. I need water coming here, and then I'm gonna pull this one over and stake it over about here. And then I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna stake it over about here instead of where it is here. And what I will have is a triangle of drip around the root zone of my bush. And so it's going to get quite a bit of water. Down here, I have a bed of iris. You'll notice there's no emitter going to this bed. They don't want any water. They'll rot if I water them all summer. So there's no drip at all on this particular plant. This one here is something I don't have a label, so I'm not sure. So I haven't put an emitter here. So it's something else. It's probably like yarrow or something else that's a xeriscape plant that doesn't want extra water. So I won't put an emitter there. This one's coming over here. And since there's no label, I don't know what it is, but it's like to the base of a large perennial. And so I'll just put one. And this one is blue, you'll notice. So that is a 1-gallon. And then if I have something like something that needs a little bit of water, but not very much, I'll put it to the base just like this, only I'll put a 1/2-gallon emitter on it instead. So this is when you have to know the water requirements of your plants when you're placing your emitters and the tubing. Oh, and another thing, when I first started, I saw somebody put an emitter here and then they ran the tube down here and then they put another emitter on the end. You don't need to do that. You only want an emitter back here on the main line. And you just leave this end open. You don't need 2 emitters on each line. So now I'm finished and I'm going to bury. I kind of dig down so that the 1/4-inch tubing is even with the ground and I stake it so it's solid. And I've staked down on my little tubes and then I'm going to cover it with mulch. So here's the border finished and mulched at the end of March. And you can't tell it's there, but it is, and it's ready to go. So watering. When do I start and how often? It really depends on the water. This picture here was taken 2 years ago and the drip still hasn't been turned on. It's been, I dug it up, made any repairs and mulched it and it's ready to go, but I haven't turned it on. 2 years ago, spring was lots earlier, so it's way ahead of where we are this year. Our system gets its water from the river, and we usually don't set it up until the end of April or early May, depending on the weather. And once it starts staying in the 70s, then we get it up and running. I try really hard to have the right plant in the right place. And most of the time I get by running the drip once every 7 to 10 days when it's hot. The zones with drip are not set on automatically. I watch the plants and use my water meter to check the beds. When I do turn it on, I usually leave it on for 8 to 12 hours, like all night. When putting in a new drip line, I won't cover it up with mulch until I've tested to see how long it takes each drip to cover the area I want covered. So let me go back here for a minute. I would want, on this picture, I would want this circle of water to get this big, and this one here to get this big, and this one to get, I would want them to overlap. So what I would do is I would get these straightened out and staked down. I would turn on the drip, and then I would watch to see how long it took till each of my drip, my emitters, had made a circle as big as I wanted it to make. And that's how long then I would know how long I needed to keep it going. So here we go. This picture was taken last May. And the drip, we still hadn't turned the drip on then, even though it had been warm and nice and we had an early spring. Almost everything that's in this border in the spring does not need any extra water. The irises are very drought tolerant. The allium are drought tolerant. There's a lot of xeriscape plants in the spring. So I still haven't turned it on. And then this is August. We ended up turning the drip on toward the end of June. The asters, the phlox, some of the other things that I have need more water, and then I start watering. So now, you've had them for a while, you do need to maintain your drip lines. As careful as I try to be, I always seem to damage emitters or chop up tubing because I don't follow the rules about when to divide things and when to plant things. I'm always dividing and planting all the time, and I try to remember to scrape down and find all the tubing, but every once in a while I get in a hurry and sure enough, I destroy it. So it's a good practice to scrape back the mulch and locate not only the main line, but all the 1/4 inch tubing. Neither one of them like being chopped up by shovels. Mending 1/4 inch tubing is really easy. Mending 1/2 inch tubing up here is hard because you don't have any give. So if I had to make a splice here, it's really, really hard to put on, to figure out exactly so that you don't have a leak. So be careful with your 1/2 inch main lines. I lift mine in the spring. I scrape all of the mulch back until I can expose the 1/2 inch tubing and all of the 1/4 inch tubing. And so it looks like this. This is the picture we were looking at before, but this is in the spring. And I'm getting ready to maintain it and add, like I know, like right here, I was going to add a plant. So I would need to add an emitter, and I was going to add another plant here, so I need to add another emitter, and this is a good time to do it. Spring, I like to do it in the spring because, let me go back here, because all of my plants are pretty dormant and I'm not damaging anything. The trouble with doing this in the spring is, especially this spring, it's been so cold and this stuff's all kind of rubber and it's really, really hard to work with when it's stiff and cold. So what I've been doing is when I want to work with it, I have to take it in the house and warm it up, then bring it back out, or bring out my hair dryer and warm it up. If I'm trying to work with this when it's cold, I'll have to warm it up because it does not go well into joints and stuff when it's cold and stiff. It goes in really easy when it's soft. So that's the advantage of doing it in the fall. Everything's warm, but then I often have a lot of plants I don't cut back. So you do some plant damage when you're trying to do it in the fall. So you have to decide what works best for you. So here we go, back to here. If you need more information on drip irrigation, this particular publication. It has everything from beginning to end that you would need, and it comes both in English and in Spanish, so this is a really good resource for you. If you're not gardening in the Willamette Valley, this is an excellent publication for Eastern and Central Oregon. And then just for all aspects of sustainable gardening, this publication is excellent. It has all the design concepts and it goes through a lot of stuff that I just covered just now. I think you'll be able to get a copy of this if you're interested. These are all the resources I used. And I think also there'll be a YouTube video if you needed to go back. And if you have questions, you can call or email if you have questions for the Lane County Master Gardeners at the OSU Extension Office, Lane County. And that's our email there and our phone number. If you have any general questions, any of the master gardeners that are working the plant clinic can answer most of these questions for you. And then here is the yard now. Well, this was June of 2019, but it looks really, really similar. And I'm finished. So if there's any questions, I'm ready.
Okay, that was Chuckie. There are a few questions.
Okay.
Can you explain why a loop works better than a single line?
The pressure's more even. Sometimes it depends on the pressure, but a lot of times as you get toward the end, let me see if I can go back. I'll go back really fast to where I have a, there we go. Okay. Sometimes depending on the pressure, and everyone's, water pressure tank works differently, but sometimes the pressure at the beginning half is better than the pressure at the end for some reason. It seems like when you make a loop, like if I'd make a loop from here to here, the pressure would be even all the way around, we found. This is such a small space compared to a lot of drip lines. None of these are like more than 10, 15 feet long. That's not very long, really. And so it's not a problem here. It just, if it's a really long area, the pressure will be better with a loop.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does a half gallon and gallon emitters mean that they give that much water over a certain period of time? If
Yeah,
so,
yes.
if so,
Half
what
gallon per hour, 2 gallons per hour, 1 gallon per hour. That's how much comes out that particular emitter. Now, how big your circle, when I was showing that, I wanted to watch the drip and see how big the circle got from the drip. That's going to depend on whether you have clay soil, or really nice soil or really sandy soil. The sandy, if you have really clay soil or you have really sandy soil, you're probably not going to want to use 2 gallon drips. You're probably going to want to limit yourself to half gallon and 1 gallon because it's slower and it works better for both of those types of soil condition.
So the other half of that question is, does the affect this, or do they somehow give the exact amount?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Does pressure affect this, or do they somehow give the exact amount?
Pressure affects it. You have to have even pressure on your whole system or they don't work. If you don't have full pressure all the way to the end, like right here where these end, and you'll be able to tell because if you're standing there watching it when you first set it up and you turn it on, this little circle down here should be growing at the same speed this one is if it's a gallon emitter. this gallon emitter little circle should be the same size as this little gallon emitter. And if it's not, then you don't have enough pressure. And that just all depends on your pressure tank, how long your tubing, how long it is. So you just got to pay attention to that. And if it looks like you're not getting, if it's all the way down here and you're just not getting enough pressure, then maybe you have too many lines or too long of lines for your particular system.
Okay, next question. Did you say you ran the water 8 to 12 hours?
I did. I usually would turn it on in the evening right after supper and leave it on all night. But then I don't turn it on again for 2 weeks. Almost sometimes 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks. It's really, really hot, maybe once a week, because I want it to get really a good drink, but then I'm not going to do it again for a long time.
Okay. Have you used soaker hoses?
I've used soaker hoses, but they, you know, a soaker hose, when you lay it down, you're going to get typically 6 to 12 inch, you know, kind of area that's watered. It doesn't seem to spread out much farther than that. And the thing I don't like about a soaker hose is I can't skip plants that don't need to be watered, and I can't put like more water on each plant that I want more water. It's just not, everything's the same on a soaker hose, whereas on a drip line, I can fine tune it to meet the needs of every plant that I have.
So that would go together with this question: do soaker hose and drip lines work well together?
On a different, no, I wouldn't put them on the same zone because, but I'm not saying it wouldn't. Like, let's say I left my drip lines out here in my flowers, but I wanted to put, if I had put them in down the center of a soaker hose, say down the center of my raised beds, which I could have done, but I didn't. What you would have to do is put it on, turn it on, and see what happens before you bury it or use it. See if this soaker hose is actually doing the job. I have a feeling that these guys out here would steal the pressure and that your soaker hose isn't going to work as well, but I don't know for sure because I've not mixed them like that. When I've used soaker hose, they've been over on the other side of a house on the end of a bib. They have not, I've not mixed them in a zone where I have converted it to drip.
Next question is, can you explain again the hardware you need when you connect the new drip system to the older overhead system? The picture was great, but I don't know the names of the parts.
Okay, well, here we go. Let's go back. These are called extenders. And if you go online and say that you want to buy a kit for converting, it will show you a picture of each of these things and it will tell you the name of it. This is just an elbow. It's called an elbow. This is called an extender. This is an elbow. The only difference is each one of these it converts. It's a female on one side and male on the other side, and it goes from one diameter to another diameter, and there's tons of different variations on it. So you have to, the first one you find matches the top of your extender, and then the next one goes to whatever's available to your elbow. And it just depends on what you start out with here and what you end up with here. These are all just converters. They're just converting the diameter to a different diameter. This is called an elbow. And then this is the hose end connector. I don't know if that helped.
The next person wants to know if you would give brand names for the materials.
No, as a master gardener, I'm not really supposed to like promote specific companies and things. But if you go to Jerry's or Winco or any of the box stores, almost all of them have drip line equipment, and almost all of them talk to each other. Mine come from a variety of places. As long as you're paying attention to diameters, that's the only thing that really matters. They almost all start with half-inch mainline tubing and use quarter-inch emitter tubing, and then the emitters all seem to be the very same, need the very same size punch. There's no difference in that. So no, I couldn't really recommend one. It's like whoever has the parts I want, that's what I buy, and I have a mixture.
What actions do you take to winterize your system?
What actions do I take to what?
Winterize.
Since it's a sprinkler system, we don't really have to blow ours out because of where we live. It doesn't really freeze here that much, or not enough for it to affect it. We have a filter system that's in the river. Before it starts to freeze, we pull the filter up out of the river, and we will turn the drip line, the whole system on, and just run it until it runs out of water, and then we turn it off. Everybody's is going to be a little bit different. So if you're used to having someone come and maintain your sprinkler system, I don't ever blow out my drip line. So you'd want to turn that zone off. You would not, I don't think you would want to blow it out. I've never ever done that.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
What is the recommended PSI pressure needed to run a drip line system?
It totally depends on how big it is. Totally depends. So you're going to have to find out what you have and how long it's going to be, and it's going to vary. So I can't give you a specific number. It's going to really depend on what you have and how big of a system you're going to put in. If you go to that drip line, that publication that I showed you at the very end of the show, that OSU has on doing drip lines, they have all the information in there for setting up that part with all the specifics for you.
Okay. One more question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you straighten a half-inch main line when you first get it from the store? It always seems to stay curled.
You pick a really hot sunny day and you stake it down in the middle of your lawn and you straighten it out. You start unrolling it and staking it as you go, and you let it stay there nice and warm until it flattens out. That's what I do. Yeah, it wants to curl around. I stake it out and warm it up and get it straight before I start using it.
Okay. So I just want everybody to know that Chad has put quite a few links in the chat box. So if there's one of the resources you would like to find, you might find the link in there. There's another question just came in. Can you fertilize plants using a drip line?
Yes, you most certainly can. I did not show it, but let me go here. I had one where, sorry, I'm looking. I don't have my whole show in front of me. Right here. If you're between here, oh, you can't see this one that I can see. Yes, between the hose end and the, I'm going to go back, sorry. Right here, between here and here, there are systems that you can put liquid fertilizer in, and it will just add it to all your plants when you turn the system on. When I worked at the greenhouse, all of our beds were on drip line, and we fed them once a week. And we set up where we could take this off really easy and hook it, add our fertilizer adapter right in here. And then when we turned the system on, everything got fertilized. Now, we didn't leave it there so that it got fertilized every single time. I think that would be overkill. You'd probably fry everything. But yes, you can. You can go online, and where they sell parts for drip lines, there is a system that you can add and fertilize. That is for liquid fertilizer.
All right. Any questions? Did you want to mention the?
Oh, yes. Okay. Coming up May 4th, 5th, and 6th, the Sustainable Landscape Committee is offering their 3-day webinar. It used to be a 3-day class that you could take at the office, but because of COVID, it's now a webinar. It's required that you register. The cost is $10, and it's 3 days, May 4th, May 5th, and May 6th, from 2 to 4 each day. And it's a 3-day thing. It's not where you can go one of the 3 days. It's a 3-day commitment. But that's coming up. And that's an excellent class. And that's just on sustainable gardening in general.
And the link to the class is in the chat box. Okay. So it looks like no more questions. So thank you very much, Chuckie, for the presentation tonight. It was very informative, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did. There's a lot of thank yous in the chat box for you. So,
well, thank you all for joining me, and I hope you all learned something and it was worth your time.
Great.
Happy gardening.
Thank you, everybody.